guys, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let's get right into this video. So today we have here Sister Spice. Hi! So you guys are probably wondering what she got on. You haven't seen these, I know.
Because I went to another nail salon.
I did these nails, but I didn't record them. And here's how they look. They're super grown out. They're all on, going strong. How long you had these on for?
A month. I have creepy Halloween Reddit stories that I'm gonna read.
Oh yeah.
And I hope they're Halloween-y enough.
So if you guys watched my last video, you know that I moved into my new apartment. So this is gonna be the first nail set in the new apartment. So for this nail set, we're gonna be doing two different designs. So in this video, we'll do one hand, and in the next video, we'll do the other hand. Okay, so join us for some creepy nails and some creepy Reddit stories. Okay, let's get into the nails. So this is the nail set we're going to be recreating today. It's orange, it's Halloween-y, it's cute. Okay, for this nail set, what you're going to need is a nude polygel, some black gel polish, some white gel polish, and also orange gel polish. And that's pretty much all we're gonna need. So let's get right into this nail set. Okay, so here's how Sister Spice's nails are looking. Very grown out. All the nails are still stuck on though, so today we're gonna be doing a fill-in. I normally don't do fills. Either we take off the nails or the nails come off or something, but we never do fills. But today we are doing one. Okay, so for a fill, we're gonna start off by doing all the cuticle prep and all this exposed nail. We're gonna prep that. We're gonna start off by pushing back the cuticles. Next, I'm going to take this circular cuticle drill bit and I'm going to work this around the cuticle area. Okay, next I'm going to take my cuticle scissors and I'm just going to trim off all this excess dead skin. Okay, so we have all the cuticle area prep, and now we're just going to file down these nails as much as we can and make sure to file off all of the lifting that you might see under there. Okay guys, so I filed off the design. Since I'm gonna be refilling these nails with the same nude polygel, they don't have to be super thin, but I am gonna try and file some of the parts that I feel like are thick, like maybe like the tips of the nails or something. Okay, so after all that filing, here's how they look. I got them filed down pretty good. I tried my best to get as much of like the lifted areas filed off as I could as well. Okay, next thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to focus on the natural nail here that's showing. I'm going to file the surface of that just to get them a little bit scratched up. nails are filed now. I'm going to wipe off all this dust. Okay, next I'm going to take some Dehydrator and I'm going to put this on all the natural nail. And next I'm going to add on some primer. Next, I'm going to add on a layer of base coat. Okay, base coat is all on. Now we're going to get into the fill. So I'm just going to take my polygel and I'm just going to put a little bit of polygel near the cuticle area. And I'm just going to push this back towards the cuticle. And then all this excess, I'm going to drag it up to the rest of the nail, kind of like an ombre.
Hi guys, it's Sister Spice, and I have my Reddit stories that I'm gonna start reading. So the first story is from the subreddit. Well, I think all of my stories are gonna be from the same subreddit, Halloween stories. This first one is called The Last Stop, and I haven't pre-read it, so I don't know if there's jump scares or anything.
Jump scares and reading.
Ron took a sip from his travel mug and winced. The coffee had gone cold. He took a breath and drained the rest of the cup. It might taste like wet dirt, but Ron needed the caffeine. Part of him regretted offering to drive his nephew and the neighbors' kids around to trick-or-treat, but he made a promise, so he'd get through it. Gosh, it was barely even 11 anyways. The night was still young. A tiny fist knocked on the glass door of the school bus. Ron stretched and pulled back the handle.
I know we barely got to read any of the story yet, but wow, it's already done. Fill-ins are so quick. The only thing, I'm gonna add a little bit more polygel at the tip of the nail because it's just looking really thin.
A tiny fist knocked on the glass door of the school bus. Ron stretched and pulled back the handle.
Wait, why are we on a school bus? I'm kind of confused.
I don't know, it didn't say. They said that they're driving them around the neighborhood.
In a school bus?
I don't know. A colorful parade of miniature monsters streamed onto the bus. Ron began his head count. 1, 2, the vampire makes 3, a Power Ranger, a basic ghost in a sheet, 6,
Dang.
7, a handful of superheroes, and a girl with surprisingly good zombie makeup. 11 kids in total sat down and began rummaging through their candy bags. Ron frowned. He checked his math again, then turned around in his seat for another head count. The head count was off. Ron had started the night with 10 kids. Did someone new get on? He asked. The kids stopped their candy counting to stare at him. None of them answered. Ron tried to single out his nephew, but couldn't remember if the boy was dressed as Spider-Man or the Red Ranger.
Oh, no.
Or maybe one of the others? Joseph? Ron asked. Did you invite a new kid on the bus? The vampire sat his bag down, but didn't make eye contact. Yes, Uncle Ron. His voice sounded unusual, strained. Ron decided the kid was probably tired. Who just got on? Ron asked. Joseph didn't reply, but he did turn to look at the ghost sitting in the back row. The kid was wearing a stained bedsheet with raggedy eye holes. Ron couldn't see the ghost well enough to tell if it was a boy or a girl. They sat in the middle of a shadow thrown from a nearby streetlight. Hey, Mr. or Miss Ghost in the back, Ron called out. Do you live on Garter Avenue? The ghost nodded. Good enough. Ron keyed the ignition and began to roll down the street. There were a few clusters of costume kids and sleepy-looking parents wandering around between houses, but Halloween was clearly winding down. It was only 2 miles back to Garter Avenue, and Ron expected at least half of the kids to be out cold before they arrived at their prearranged stop to unload. He felt a comfortable flush of pride that he'd done one good deed in October. Hopefully, going trick-or-treating on a school bus would be a nice memory for Joseph and the rest of the kids.
Remember that one Halloween we went trick-or-treating on that school bus with your uncle?
Can you imagine that? A small voice began to sob behind Ron. He glanced up at the wide mirror above the windshield. The bus was dark, each child a hunched silhouette. Ron noticed movement at the back of the bus. The kid in the dirty bedsheet was standing up, swaying just enough to rustle the fabric. "Hey, Casper, sit down, please," Ron called out, but he was ignored. A little girl dressed up like a princess in a pink gown sat one row ahead of the ghost. She began crying hysterically. The ghost snapped its head towards the sound. "What's wrong, kiddo?" Ron asked. Other than the sobbing, it was silent in the bus, and his voice carried. The little girl didn't respond. She only cried louder and began trembling. The kid in the ghost costume walked forward one row and turned to face the girl. Ron lost sight of her in the mirror, his vision blocked by the grayed bedsheet. "Hey, kid in the ghost costume," he yelled. "I'm serious. Go back to your seat. Hey, sit down." The sheet continued to sway. Suddenly, it stopped. A shriek filled the bus. "Jesus Christ!" Ron shouted, slamming on the brakes. Or at least, that's the signal his brain sent to his leg. Ron found that he couldn't move his foot to the brake, couldn't really move at all other than continue driving. It was as if he was stuck in place by an invisible force, a butterfly nailed to a board by a glass pin. Ron's eyes could move, and his hands, but the latter didn't obey him. His fingers continued to grip the steering wheel at 10 and 2, relaxed, as if the little kid wasn't screaming her lungs out down the aisle. Ron's hand gently turned the wheel, guiding the bus down an unlit side street that he'd never seen before. He didn't want to make the turn, fought against it so hard that the tendons strained in his neck. But Ron couldn't resist. The girl was screaming louder, then the sound cut off. Silence. Ron glanced up to the mirror. All of the children were facing straight ahead. Some were shaking or sobbing, or sitting with their eyes jammed shut. The ghost had turned, still blocking whatever had happened to the girl in the princess costume. Ron noticed that the bedsheet was ripped and muddy at the hem, hanging low over bare feet. The kid wasn't wearing any shoes, revealing skinny ankles and pale toes, gone black at the edges. Whatever he was wearing, the ghost costume seemed to notice Ron's attention. It took a few steps forward in the aisle, now even with the next row of seats. One of the boys nearby started making a pitiful whining noise, but no one tried to run or even stand. Everyone was apparently frozen by the same force that held Ron in place and kept him driving casually on. Now that the ghost had moved, Ron tried searching the mirror for any signs of the girl in the princess costume. However, the back of the bus was now completely dark.
Okay, for the next nail, we're going to be doing an ombre, so I'm going to take this orange gel polish, and I'm going to paint this at the tip of the nail, just until where I want the ombre to start.
The ghost again blocked Ron's vision of several trick-or-treaters. Several children began screaming all at once. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee!" Ron mumbled, wishing he could take his hands off the steering wheel so he could clutch the crucifix he wore around his neck. Even as the wailing continued farther back in the bus, Ron noticed that they were driving down an unknown road. He was familiar with every street and cutout within 20 miles of the town, and he was sure he'd never been down this particular lane. There were no houses, no lights, only tall and crooked trees. The street had no shoulders and curved like a triangle ribbon. Ron watched as strange figures darted and danced between the elms and pines. Several shapes hung down from branches, a few close enough to almost brush the top of the bus. The windows all around Ron began to fog, then frost, then became caked with ice, all in a matter of minutes. He could no longer see the road, but it didn't matter. Whatever controlled his hands knew where to go. Ron closed his eyes. The screaming was everywhere now, an endless barrage of high-pitched terror and agony and helplessness. He was also afraid to look up in the mirror, but when the shrieking got too close, Ron couldn't resist. The thing in the ghost costume was now 2 rows behind the driver's seat. Everything behind the creature was pitch black. Its sheet was a soaking red mess that clung to a short and emaciated frame. There was only one other child on the bus, Ron's nephew, in his place of honor, sitting in the front seat. The boy was curled up, shaking violently, head pressed to his knees. "Hey, Joseph," Ron whispered. "It's gonna be okay, buddy." The red ghost stood watching in the aisle, head crooked to one side like it was curious. Even up close, Ron couldn't see any eyes, just those torn holes in the sheet. Something began scratching at a nearby window, which was so threaded with frost it looked like an ivory plate. There was banging, knocking, heavy blows impacting the bus on all sides. The engine died and then rolled to a stop. Joseph was pressed against the wall, as far from the aisle as he could manage. The thing in the sheet moved forward again, filling the rearview mirror, blocking out everything else. "It's gonna be okay, Joseph," Ron lied, eyes shut and hands pressed against his ears. "Just hang tight, buddy. It's gonna be all right." The end?
Oh, that's it?
Yes. A person commented, "Where's the rest?" The author replied to the comment, "Gotta use your imagination."
Oh, so that's just it.
So what are your thoughts on that story?
Definitely a ghost. Whatever that ghost kid was.
Like, actually supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
Like, actually, it could have been just like a floating sheet. I'm not too sure how I like the ending. I mean, no, I think it was a good ending because the story could have gone on and on. But okay, everyone on that bus just
disappeared.
Mm-hmm. And the nephew was the last kid to disappear. And then I bet Ron was gonna survive. And he was going to be blamed for the whole thing. Rampaged uncle, sick of driving his kids around trick-or-treating.
And what even is that bus?
I guess it was a school bus.
If it was a school bus, they might have trackers on it. Tracked it, saw that Ron brought them to a random street. And they're like, yeah, why would you do this, Ron? And all kids are gone.
And he couldn't control himself, so it's not like he could have stopped it. And he's going to blame Ron.
Definitely.
That gave me chills. And I came up with that. Okay, you can tell us what you guys think about this first story in the comments too. But I'm gonna move on to my next one. This next story is I Dare You. The 4 kids walked along the sidewalk. At this late hour, the throng of trick-or-treaters had thinned out considerably. The full moon cast its pale glow all over. Trevor drew in a large breath and exhaled loudly. Best night of the year, isn't it? Aren't we a little old for this? Jay offered hesitantly. We're almost 13. What? 13? Hey, free candy's free candy, Trevor excluded. Besides, I've had enough of vandalizing for one night. We're out of shaving cream and toilet paper anyways. We're not even wearing costumes.
They're one of those.
Yeah. We're not even wearing costumes, Derek pointed out. We'll just tell them we dressed as juvenile delinquents, Trevor cowered. They came upon a darkened house with an overgrown front yard, empty lots on either side. The front gate, though latched, was unlocked. How about this house? Trevor suggested. I think I see a bowl out front. I don't know, guys. Jay sniveled. I heard the owner was a recluse and died a week ago after getting mugged. I have a bad feeling about this. Trevor turned to Jay, his face twisted in a mocking expression. Oh, really? Aren't you a little old for that? Laughter erupted. Come on, guys, Jay whined. Cut it out. Just for that, Trevor declared, you have to open the gate. Jay reached out tentatively for the gate latch, then withdrew his hand. No way! Trevor groaned. Oh my god, you're such a wuss. Why do we even hang out with you? Trevor pushed past Jay, move, and unlatched the gate. It opened with some mirror creaking. Trevor grabbed Jay's shoulder and shoved him towards the open gate. Jay resisted. Suddenly, Trevor let go. Jay flopped backwards and landed clumsily on the sidewalk, crying out in pain, while his trick-or-treating candy spewed out onto the street. The jeering returned. Trevor strode confidently towards the house. Derek and Ken followed. After a few moments, Jay picked himself up, dusted himself off, and ran to catch up with them. Forget about his Halloween candy. They stopped before the bowl. Trevor laughed as he read the handwritten note. 1 piece per visitor, please. He ripped the note from where it was posted, crumpled it up, and flung it into the yard. Trevor contemplated the darkened house. Doesn't look like anyone's home. Let's empty this bowl. Derek reached into the darkness, then jerked away. What the heck? Why is it crunchy in there? Ken switched on his cell phone flashlight and shined it inside. Oh, gross.
In the bowl?
In the bowl. Oh, gross. There's a layer of dead leaves over the candy. Trevor grabbed handfuls of the leaves and tossed them aside, revealing saltwater taffy, caramels, and undersized no-name lollipops. And they only have loser candy. He glowered at the front door. Here's what I think of your crummy candy. Trevor kicked the bowl, sending much of the contents sailing as it flew towards the front door. It impacted with a plastic thud. The door creaked open slightly. Trevor turned back and grinned. Cool, free house. Let's check it out. He glowered at Jay. Unless you're too afraid. Jay stood there wordlessly. Trevor threw his hands in the air, then turned and marched inside. The others followed. Moonbeams shone through dirty windows, forming dusty columns that played over the front door. Ken coughed lightly. Derek sneered. Oh man, would you look at this old crap. Wow, look at that. Jay stared up at a large painting on the wall. It depicted a tall, pale man with long gray hair and a goatee, surrounded by 3 older men, each in an inscrutable action pose. All had intense glares in their eyes and wore tacky flowing robes. One had a crystal ball. Scary, isn't it? Jay mumbled hesitantly. Are you kidding? Trevor jeered. They look like the house band at Ren Fair. The guy in the middle is the lead lute player and totally fails to score, Derek gloated. Trevor snorted as he grabbed a nearby staff. Here's what I think of your loser band. He struck the bottom corner of the painting, leaving it tilted. Without warning, a bookcase swung away from the wall, revealing a set of stairs leading down.
No
Cool!
way.
A secret room! Ken exulted. Turning on his cell phone flashlight once more, he crept inside. The others followed. Before them lay an ornate altar. Atop it sat candles, a crystal ball, and several animal skulls. Derek lit the candles. Ken switched off his flashlight. Trevor tried to stifle a laugh. Okay, now, this is really too much. What a mega dork. I don't think we should be messing around with this, guys. Jay piped up meekly. Trevor slapped the back of Jay's head. You freaking dweeb. I dare you to touch it. Otherwise, go find new friends. Jay hesitated, then his face became determined. Fine. I'm no coward. He defiantly thrusted his hand forward and touched the altar. In an instant, the look in Jay's eyes turned to a grim determination. Quickly, he grabbed Ken's hand and forced it to the altar. The look in Ken's eyes changed instantly too. Together, they grabbed Derek's hand, who was now resisting. They struggled as they tried to force Derek to touch the altar. Trevor took off running. He was only a few houses away when he had to stop and rest. His heart raced. His lungs ached and dizziness threatened to buckle his knees. He heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see his 3 compatriots run up to him, Jay holding some sort of wand. Trevor tried to shield himself with his arms, but Jay merely touched the wand to Trevor's arm. Then Trevor collapsed. Minutes later, the 4 stood in a semicircle around the altar, their faces smirking, their eyes bearing ancient glares. The one formerly known as Jay held an ornate staff. On this day, the most unhallowed of days, we have returned. The gods themselves couldn't hold back this coven. The others nodded somberly. Jay continued, and now we can spread our terror for another generation. He tapped the staff loudly on the floor. Tick, tick. The locals will regret their crime against me. The end. So it's like if you touch the altar, you get possessed. You get possessed by the spirits in there.
And what happened to the owner of that house?
The owner of that house said that he died in a bad accident. Well, all those little kids got taken by that altar. And now they're different people. One of the comments under it says, no matter how tough you think you are, there's always someone worse. Or there's always someone tougher.
Okay, here are how the nails look after they have been filled. Now I'm just going to wipe off that sticky layer from the nails.
Once we're done with the shaping, I'm gonna start reading my next story.
Okay, now I just have my Makartt dust collector and a hand file, and let's get reshaping these nails.
I'm so proud of you.
Repeat after me. You stay within the family. You better.
So the nails have been shaped. Now I'm going to wipe off the dust from the nails. Let's get into this nail art. So on the first nail, I'm going to be painting it orange.
I'm back with my story. This next one is called The Mask Game. Amber was the last to arrive. Her 3 friends were already seated around the campfire. The sound of laughter drifted out into the dark. She took a deep breath, then slipped through the wedged open gate and headed towards the fire. Candy paper wrappers already littered the ground. Amber wrinkled her nose and made a mental note to ask everyone to clean up before they left. Knowing that it would earn eye rolls and shrugs, her friends saw the Redcliffe estate as a fun, maybe haunted, in a touristy way, place to hang out. They couldn't care less about its history. Amber used to think Joe did, but that was before. Amber joined her friends by the fire, sitting on a log at the edge of the light. "You're late," Jordan said, not looking up. She pressed at the burning fire pit with a thin branch, coaxing sparks into the air. "Forgot my mask," Amber replied. "Had to drive back." "We're ready," Luther interrupted. Joe was looking everywhere but Amber. "We're ready." They'd found the game online, buried in a list of more familiar options like a gold tooth and a common smile. In links for Ouija, custom tarot decks, and urban legends was The Mask Game. The rules were simple. On Halloween night, gather in a group somewhere that is close to the dead. Redcliffe had its own graveyard at the grounds. The estate was sprawling, containing acres of woods, a 3-story house, and smaller outbuildings, all preserved by the local historic society. A split rail fence made from rough wood enclosed the main property. Best of all for the game, Redcliffe was isolated and off-limit to visitors at night. So why are they there? Everyone needed to bring a new mask, to dress in all black, and then a fire had to be built in a certain way. Then everyone needed to get entirely, breathtakingly drunk. If all went well and the spirits found the players interesting, then some would join the group as they played their game, mimicking the living. At the end, they would vote on who was real and who was visiting from the other side. What the? I don't get it. I mean, I get it, but it's like, what? Amber and her friends sat drinking, sharing candy, and feeding the fire for another hour. Eyes tightened, head swimming, Amber felt surface calm but concerned. She kept toying with the plastic mask in her purse. Oh, so they all wear masks, so they don't know who is who, but they gotta guess who is living and who's from the other side. Something about the October air felt thin, fragile, waiting. "Maybe we shouldn't play," Amber said. Luther giggled and rolled his eyes. "Told y'all. Amber, the party
Poopa.
the party dampener rides again."
Oh.
Yours was way better.
That's way
though.
better.
I'm gonna switch it and say that. Because they said Amber, the party dampener rides again.
What does that
Yours
even
was
mean?
Better. I don't know. Yours was way better though. Luther giggled and rolled his eyes. "Told y'all. Amber, the party poopa, rides again." Stop.
It is better.
"Take it easy on her," Joe said, but Amber could see the hint of his smile in the flicker of the light. Jordan stretched out long legs, clad in black denim. Amber noticed that Jordan's bare feet came to rest on the on the edge of Joe's log. Have another drink or 3, Jordan suggested. Then we'll get started. Amber hesitated. The campfire was painting purple, black shadows across the friends' faces. All such pretty people, trimmed and young, carefree or at least careless. Right then, she resented them. How little they seemed to respect Redcliffe or the game, but she listened to Jordan. Another half hour passed and the fire began to burn low. The 4 were the special kind of drunk that only comes with Halloween. Jordan had moved over to share Joe's seat. Let's get started then, Joe said. Jordan stood up slowly. Remember, no cheating, no peeking. Walk until the fire and everybody else is out of sight. Put on your mask and make your way back from a different direction. If we're lucky, a few new friends just might join us. Oh, and no flashlights or phones. Gotta keep everything secret. They each went their own way. Amber stumbled over the uneven ground, nearly running into a tree at the edge of the lawn. She turned and could still see the campfire, so she pushed into the forest. The night was getting colder, and Amber shivered, wishing she'd worn something thicker than a hoodie. Above her, blue autumn stars dusted the sky. Amber thought she heard movement ahead of her in the woods, then laughter. She slipped on her mask, a white cat, and quickly headed back. When Amber drew close to the campfire, she froze. Her friends were back and already seated. There were 4 people on the log and stumps that ringed the fire. Oh my goodness, one of them said, their voice an unrecognizable buzz. The speaker was wearing a jester mask. Amber also saw a gray wolf, a robot, and a skull. All 4 were facing her. Who are you? Robot asked, and again she couldn't recognize the voice. Wolf shook their head. No, you're not supposed to tell us yet. Sit down. Is it her friends, or did she stumble across another campfire? I don't know. I don't think so, because, they're the only ones there. They're isolated.
I gotta redo this.
This is so wild, Skull giggled. Seriously, what are you all trying to pull? Amber sat down as far away from the others as she could. What's going on? She was startled to realize she didn't recognize her own voice. It sounded far away and flat. Jester tossed another branch into the fire. It seems like one of 2 things. Someone here is with us and snuck another friend in, or Jester looked from mask to mask. The game worked, and one of you doesn't belong. So they started with 4 friends. They only had 4 friends: Amber, Jordan, Jay, and Luther. But now there was 4 people already sitting at the campfire when Amber came back. So it's like, who's this other person? Or maybe you're the pretender, Wolf suggested. How can we tell? Amber asked. No one spoke. The only sound was the occasional pop of the fire. It was burning well, but the light was weak and the warmth was all gone. Amber winced at the breeze with a winter bite blew through the yard. The temperature was dropping rapidly and Amber's breath rolled out like steam. Robot cleared their throat. What if without warning, the flame went down to embers and there was no light at all? Amber heard cursing, bodies moving, thumping together. As suddenly as it went out, the fire roared back. Oh God, someone whispered. What the heck? There were dozens of masked figures around the fire now. Some were seated until the logs were filled. The rest were standing in a circle. Amber saw animal masks and monsters, plague doctors, and masquerades. Everyone wore black, and she couldn't recognize anyone. This is messed up. A voice came from the crowd. This is so messed up, several voices replied in echo. Every word one person spoke, the crowd repeated. What's going on? Stop! Joe? Please stop. Jordan? Where's everyone? Please stop. Please stop. It's like, do you remember they said that the ghost will mimic the living?
Mm-hmm.
So if you say something, it's going to mimic what you say.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's happening. The crowd was becoming agitated. Bodies pressed in around Amber, squeezing to sit next to her, looming at her sides. Light from the fire dipped again, then flared to reveal even more masked figures in the yard. Hundreds. When the fire settled low and without warmth, Amber could see eyes glowing behind the mask, in the dark like wild animals waiting with predator patient. Help! Amber screamed. I don't want to be here. Please, someone, please. She began to sob. The crowd all turned to watch her. Is that Amber? Came a voice from out in the night. Is she crying? Crying again? Crying again? A chorus of familiar voices. They sounded like Amber's friends, but coming from every direction. Stop it, Amber whispered. I want to go home. Told you she wouldn't want to play, a dozen voices said together, all sounding like Luther. Found another party to dampen. Not her fault, Joe's voice echoed over and over. Always been a scaredy cat. Always running. Poor little Amber, the crowd said, mimicking Jordan. If you weren't so fragile, maybe Joe would have liked you better. Amber put her head down. Stop! Shut up! Shut up, shut up, shut up. It was so cold that Amber couldn't stop shaking. The grass under her feet was brittle, brushed with frost. She tore at her mask. Electric panic scorched nerves. Even with her fingernails digging into her skin hard enough to draw blood, the cheap plastic mask was stuck. The game's not over yet, voices called out from one another. Masks, stay on. Amber heard another voice woven in. Familiar voices, but they were drowned out by the chorus. Under the words, she heard other sounds, animal noises, weeping, laughter, and growl. The fire faded, and all Amber could see were shadows. Guess! Guess! Excited voices cried out. Someone needs to guess. Who is real and who is pretend? Let Amber do it, the voice sounded like Joe. Amber, 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 Amber. I don't know, she said. Don't make me. You have to pick, said a single voice, clear and cold in her head. Who is real? Who is pretend? Who should go? Everyone, Amber whispered. None of you are real. None of you. None of you care. She thought of the way Luther would roll his eyes when she had something to say, of Jordan's grin and her legs resting near Joe. You're all fake, and you can all go to hell for all I care, Amber said, shutting her eyes. Okay, the voice agreed. When Amber looked up, she was alone. The area around Redcliffe House was empty. There was only her and a fire. She ripped her mask off and threw it into the flames. It burned brightly. Amber sat staring at the fire, trying to keep her hands from shaking. Once she was nearly steady, she brought up the flashlight of her phone and swept it across the yard. The bottles and litter she noticed before were all scattered over the lawn, but there was no signs of her friends. None of them answered when she called them. She almost left Joe a voicemail, but couldn't think of anything to say. It wasn't me, Amber said out loud as she got up to leave. All a trick. Pretend. A game. It wasn't real, Amber said out loud as she got up to leave. All a trick. Pretend. A game. As she headed towards the gate, Amber promised herself that she'd return in the morning to look for Luther, Jordan, and Joe. At the very least, she'd clean up the mess they'd left.
I don't know. The story's a bit confusing.
A bit confusing. I think
But maybe in the end, it'll make sense.
This is the end.
Oh.
We're done. This story is done.
Oh, that was it?
That was it.
She left?
She just left. She said, I cleaned up their junk, but I left.
What the?
I think it was real, and I think she sent all her friends into the depths of the underworld.
Mm-mm.
And then now she's going to be like, hey, have you seen... And then she's going to go, to like Joe's house.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to be like, hey, to Joe's parents. Hey, have you seen Joe? And then the parents are going to be like, no, we haven't seen Joe since last night. And she's going to be like, oh. And then she's going to go to Jordan's house. Same thing. Luther's house. Same thing. And then she's going to be like the only one out of the group. And it's going to be the ending of the last story, where she's blamed for the murders of all her 3 friends.
Aw, he's a cute Oogie.
Okay, this next story is called When a Black Cat Crosses Your Path. I've never been the superstitious type, but I'll say it. Having a black cat cross your path is bad luck. How are you not superstitious but say that? Like, that's the most, superstitious thing. Especially if the path it takes happens to be in front of your vehicle. And especially if the cat belongs to my neighbor, Gary. Oh, tell me that wasn't Miss Mittens, I gasped, glancing at my wife. She only bit her lip and her eyes widened. But sure enough, it was, and I was given the unpleasant task of cradling the poor Mittens in my jacket as we walked to Gary's front porch to tell him what had happened. Gary, why are you letting your cat out of the house? It didn't take him long to answer the door. As soon as it swung open, his eyes fixed on the bundle in my arms. The look on his face told me he knew what it contained. Long before my wife finished sputtering out an apology, he didn't say much, and after I handed mittens to him, he nodded and closed the door. All in all, he had taken it well, but the guilt I felt was nearly unbearable. Any time I left the house, I made sure to avoid looking across the street and quickly duck inside my car. I wondered just how long I could keep this up before I inevitably saw him again. That only turned out to be a few days. As I returned home from work one evening, he was carrying boxes of Halloween decorations out to his front yard. Every year, Gary seemed to expand on his impressive holiday displays, and by the looks of it, Mitten's demise had not put a damper on his ambitions. He looked up as I approached, giving me a large smile. I managed a sheepish wave before pulling into the driveway and retreating inside. "Did you see Gary's lawn?" my wife asked when she got home. "Yeah, he's going all out. Guess we didn't ruin his Halloween for him after all," I said absently, absorbed in the show I was watching. "No, that's not what I mean. Come here," she insisted. What could be in his lawn? Pulling me off the couch, she leaped me to the window and pulled the curtain open a sliver. "Look!" I scanned through his yard, taking in the unusual sights of ghouls, ghosts, zombies, climbing out of the earth, witches, skeletons, scarecrows, bloody mannequins, and black lighting, before finally finding the jack-o'-lanterns. There were dozens of them on his steps, all expertly carved, but the two sitting in his window immediately stood out. What the? Flickering by candlelight in vivid detail, our faces staring back at us. I marveled at how he was able to capture our likeness so perfectly, but the sight of them sent a chill up my spine. Why would he do that? It's so weird. I can't stand them. You need to go over there and tell him to get rid of them, my wife insisted. What the?
I mean, you ran his cat over. I'd be mad too.
And it's a nice pumpkin art.
Right.
Though the pumpkins were unnerving, the thought of going to talk to Gary repulsed me. I mean, it's weird, but they're his pumpkins. I don't really think we can tell him what to do with. Fine. If you won't, I will. With that, she marched out the door. I watched her storm down the driveway through the curtains, ashamed of my cowardice. But once she reached the road, she froze. I followed her gaze, and my blood ran cold as I saw what she was looking at. In the window, smiling back at her, stood Gary. She began to back away as his grin widened. He turned his head directly toward where I was spying, locked eyes with me, and waved. So he's staring out his window.
And watching them about to come up to his house.
We tried to ignore them. We did our best to pretend that we preferred having the curtains drawn at all times, but having them out of sight did not keep them out of mind. When Halloween finally arrived, a sense of relief washed over me. Surely those disturbingly face-like faces would be gone soon, and we could return to normalcy. Unlike years past, we turned all of our lights off to deter any trick-or-treaters from coming to our door. For the most part, the evening was uneventful. Occasionally our bell would ring when someone disregarded Halloween etiquette, but other than that, all was quiet. Yeah, but the light isn't on. They're not home. We went to bed that night feeling great, and maybe even a little foolish for keeping ourselves prisoners the last couple weeks. You know, I bet it was all just a prank. A little Halloween joke, you know? I chuckled. Maybe he was just trying to spook us a bit. Well, it worked. He must have been laughing his ass off watching us sprint inside all the time. I mean, that would be funny in itself. You did run over my cat. The next morning, I opened the door and leisurely strolled to my car to find Gary already at work taking his decorations down. This man works fast. He said, next holiday.
His Christmas lights are their face.
He looked up when he noticed me, and we waved to each other. Indeed, it looked like things would go back to normal. Oh, they didn't. When I returned home, Gary had taken everything down. Everything, that is, except our pumpkins.
No
They
way.
continued to glare at me from the window. If it was a prank, it had gone too far. I felt anger rising in my chest, and I finally decided to do something about it. I mean, pumpkins are still very fall. Pumpkins are still very Thanksgiving. I could keep that up. I pounded on Gary's door, my knuckles white with rage. The minute he opened the door, the words spilled out of me before I could stop myself. Take those freaking pumpkins down, Gary! He stood silent for a while, watching me seethe on his doorstep. A thin smile spread across his lips before he finally spoke. "No," he said, closing the door before I could say anything more. I slammed on the wood some more and rang the bell, but he only turned out the lights, leaving me alone as the eerie jack-o'-lanterns leered at me from behind the glass. It's been a week since that night. With each passing day, it has only gotten worse. It started when my wife got sick. She woke up one morning feeling extremely sluggish, and as I watched her struggle down the stairs, I became aware of my own fatigue. We dismissed it for a while. It was easy enough to assume we had the flu or something. We stayed home and cuddled on the couch under a blanket. But after 3 days, I knew something was very wrong, as I watched my wife's beautiful features start to sag and wrinkle. By then, she could pull herself upright, and I barely had the energy to fetch us water. I could feel it beneath my skin, the rot, the decay. We were dying, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I held my wife close, her body melting from the inside out, her every breath drawn in agony. I couldn't bear to watch her suffer that way. I walked across the street. The walk across the street took most of my strength. I fell to my knees, dragging myself up Gary's driveway with disintegrating hands, leaving a trail of blood behind me as the coarse surface tore my skin apart. I looked at the rotting pumpkins in his window. They were barely recognizable. Their faces folded inwards and they leaked brownish liquids from their mouth. As I tried to pull myself to my feet, I became aware of a shadow looming over me. "Gary, please," I gasped, the words thick and sticky in my throat. I watched him turn away and walk up his steps as I pleaded, "Gary." When he returned, he placed his foot on my shoulder, crushing what was left of my bones under his loafer. If I could have screamed, I would have. He turned my head with his heel so that I was able to see what he was holding. He held my wife's jack-o'-lantern, with an eyebrow raised, wordlessly questioning me. Do it," I begged. It hit the concrete, splattering my face with warm blood, and I knew her suffering had ended. This was the only mercy he granted me. Immediately after, he went back inside, leaving me to rot on the pavement. And I know I will lie here until I turn to mush, until I completely dissolve. I know that I will remain here until Gary finally hoses me into the gutter. The end.
So they turned into pumpkins.
They turned into pumpkins!
This is so cute so far.
This next story is called I Want Candy!
Oh yeah.
We're still in the same subreddit, the Halloween stories. It was my last year in high school. I was 17. When I knocked on the door, a woman answered. "Aren't you a little too old to trick-or-treat?" she said. I said nothing and offered my bag. "Candy is for children," she repeated. I nodded and turned away. As I walked down the driveway, my empty bag flopped from side to side. I heard something behind me and turned around. I saw children dressed as pumpkins, ghosts, witches, and superheroes lined up to her door. She beamed. The setting sun shone upon their excited faces as they yelled, "Trick or treat!" and offered their baskets and bags with plumped hands. The woman couldn't stop smiling, her teeth white as she dropped silver chocolates that looked like musketeers into their bags. I wonder if she was a vampire, sucking the life out of their energy through the air, their young blood, flesh, and untaintedness. I turned back to the sidewalk and continued walking. The suburban houses, decorated with candlelit pumpkins, plastic skeletons, and cobwebs on the window, began to fade. I was in a darker area of the neighborhood. The thing behind me was still there, but all I could think about was last month when a man emailed my father and revealed that he was an old friend from the pre-war days. The man came over with his teenage son, and I told his son a joke, and the son laughed. I remember the rush I felt when the son laughed, like I had just eaten a candy. How I longed for candy. My father was against sweet stuff because it was bad for my teeth. My father had laughed while the man was there, but afterwards he told me the man was untrustworthy and I was to stay away from him and his son. The thing behind me grew larger and fuller, and now its shadow was upon me, darkening the sky to a muddy red. I approached my destination and turned. For a second I saw a blue sky, a blue house, my father and his pre-war friend, the teenage son inviting me from the doorway to play video games. We'd tell jokes and eat candy. Then the streetlights flickered on, and I saw the sky was black. The windows and doors dark and empty, like toothless gaps in a mouth that had eaten too much candy. I turned to the bent, rusted mailbox and opened its unwilling jaws. Envelopes advertising community colleges for skills I didn't care for. Loans promising unbelievable amounts with high interest, in fine print, and birthday cards from my mom. In curly letters, it said, "Happy 18th birthday." A $100 check fluttered down from the envelope. I picked it up and went inside. The thing followed. In the living room, my father sat on the sofa, watching the screen with zombie attention. Beer cans scattered on the floor. "Where have you been?" he slurred. "Can't be out this late." "I don't care," I said. He turned, his eyes red, veined and decaying face. Later on, as I entered my room, icing my face, I walked to my desk and sat down. I looked in the mirror, examining the crow's feet that branched under my eyes. The wrinkles would grow larger and I would grow weaker until everything would give one day, like a net crumpling inwards in a mess of blood and bones. The thing behind me whispered, "Do you want candy?" I swallowed the candies. 1, 20, 30. I stumbled and fell onto the ground. The crows laughed and circled, flying above me, depositing more and more candies into my mouth. Sweet, sweet candies. Sleep candies. The end. I don't know. I don't know, man. Like I said, I didn't pre-pick these. I think this might be the last story, and it's called The Pumpkin Patch. The rickety tractor slowed to a stop in the middle of the pumpkin field. Crows circling above, rows upon rows of decaying vegetables, each of them mushy and buzzing with flies. The farmer killed the engine and looked around, almost as if he was mourning for his rows of rotting pumpkins. He turned his attention to the hayrider passenger, which consisted of 3 people, a husband, wife, and their little girl. He scratched his head and motioned to the field. "Well, folks, I'm sad to say that's the best of 'em. Weather didn't quite cooperate this year. This year's harvest was a bit of a wash." Despite the field full of rotten vegetables, Brittany seemed ecstatic. She bounced on her hay bale, eager to find the perfect pumpkin. Her parents looked at her, then to the field before exchanging mutual looks of disappointment. Brittany reminded them she was turning 6 this year, and she wanted to be a big girl and pick out a pumpkin all by herself. Reluctantly, they let her go, deciding they would watch from the hay wagon. She squealed with excitement and took off, running and leaping over rows to find the perfect one. "Don't go too far! Stay where we can see you!" her father called, but she was so focused on scanning the rotten pumpkins she didn't acknowledge them. In Brittany's determined search, she encountered a rabbit. It was an adorable little thing, and at the sight of it, she seemed to forget all about her hurt. She was transfixed by a rabbit. With its fluffy fur and marble-like eyes, when it noticed her presence, it scurried away, dashing through the patch in a white blur. Brittany gave chase, her pink rubber boots sloshed in the mud with every step. She weaved between carved-in husks and vines, hardly noticing the stray feathers and half-eaten mice. Her boots stepped over bird carcasses and little piles of bones, little masses that seemed to be covered in dry, yellow slime. When she finally found the rabbit, it was fidgeting nervously in the back against one of the bright-colored pumpkins. She reached out a hand towards it and tried to beckon it, looking into its sweet little eyes of the rabbit. By the time she noticed the gaping jaws, it was too late. In a flash of orange and red, the rabbit was consumed, hundreds of wicked teeth mincing the rabbit with a crunch. The large pumpkin looked at her with boiled-like eyes, glowing pupils staring as it noshed the rabbit into paste. When all Brittany could do was watch in terror, the pumpkin paused for a moment and opened its mouth to show the slimy, bloody contents. A scream rang through the field and her parents came running. She didn't want these pumpkins, was all she said. Her parents shrugged and took her home. They're like, okay. On the way, they stopped at the store to cheer her up. Later that night, a watermelon was carved. Oh, that's a really cute ending. Later that night, a watermelon was carved. She just witnessed a tiny little bunny get eaten by a pumpkin. Ravenous. Would you be traumatized, or would you be like...
I'd be traumatized.
like that thing's gonna eat me next.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the ending. The little watermelon being carved, that's cute. Now this one for real will be the last story, I hope. This story is titled All Hail the Pumpkin King. I think Luke is the first one to notice him. He's the new boy, freshly enrolled a few days before October ends. Like all new boys, people treated him like he is invisible. No one really pays much attention to him. I sat behind him in geography, and he's acting like kind of weird. He's moaning and groaning about a headache, for one. His head is swelling and turning this bright, carroty orange, veins throbbing and arteries pulsing. His teeth are falling out by the dozens. What the heck? I only got 2 dozens of teeth, like...
And they're just witnessing this happening?
I don't know. Yellow and decaying, and his breath smells like he's eaten a dead fish. He is always smiling. What the heck? And he keeps on muttering about the Pumpkin King. Who is the Pumpkin King? Sounds like he's turning into the Pumpkin King. His head's turning orange. Later that night, my head feels like it's about to split open. Simply put it feels like all my nerves are screaming at once. I take an aspirin, but it doesn't work. In fact, it seems to make the pain even worse. And every night I dream of him, the Pumpkin King. He speaks to me. Our time is coming. Every night I hear him. Every night my head hardens and swells and ripens in orange. No longer soft as a peach, but rough and hard and husky. I grin through. The pain is going away, replaced by pure happiness. Every night I lose weight too, my body turning skinnier and a moldy green. I don't care. Food is not interesting anyway. Our time is coming. Every night I hear him, my Lord and Savior. On Halloween night I hear him again. Our time is here. I'm ready. I know what to do. It's like an instinct. I take my sharpest knife and walk outside. I see others doing the same. Joseph, Luke, all of them. I see some people trick-or-treating. They must see how great the Pumpkin King is. I pounce, not giving them time to cry out. With my knife, I carve out their face, first gouging out their eyes and then carving out their mouths into a smile. The Pumpkin King smile. Blood oozes out of their mouths, but they now look like him. They are complete with him. Just the rest of the town left, and we're finally together with him, the Pumpkin King. The end. So it's like they turned into pumpkins, and the regular people who didn't turn into pumpkins, they turned them into pumpkins by carving them. So everyone's a pumpkin. What in the pumpkin pie is this? But that was the last story. So I'll see you in the next video with more creepy stories or Halloween stories.
Okay, so now that all the nail art is done, we're gonna finish this set off with some top coat. Okay, finally, let's add on some cuticle oil. And here are how the nails turned out. Let me know what you guys think of this nail set in the comments. I really, really love these nails. Like, they turned out so good. I'm so happy with the nail art. Let me know in the comments which nail is your guys' favorite. To be honest, I have a couple. I really like the yin and yang ghost nail. I also really like the pumpkin nail because, I don't know, it just looks like straight out of the picture. I just love it. But yeah, these are some really cute Halloween nails. I hope you guys enjoyed this super long video with all the creepy Reddit stories. Also, let me know your thoughts on the different stories. The next video is going to be part 2, so I'm I'm going to be doing my sister's other hand with a different nail design, and we're going to be telling a lot more scary stories, so make sure you stay tuned. Halloween is almost here. Let me know what you guys are going to be doing for Halloween. I'm having a Halloween party on Sunday, so the day before Halloween. It's not really a party, it's just me and my family, but still, it's a party. So I'm pretty excited for that. But anyway, that is pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye!